In the north of Scotland lays the Pentland Firth, a stretch of water between the Orkney Isles and the Scottish mainland. Despite its name, it's not actually a firth as we would know it today. It in fact comes from an Old Norse name, meaning the fjord of Pictland, and before that it was known to the Scots as the Sea of Orcs. The Orcs being a Pictish tribe said to live on the isolated islands. This particular stretch of sea has always been well known by islanders and mariners alike for its savage weather and ferocious tides. It was due to this dangerous crossing that the Orkney Islands remained so incredibly isolated for many years. That was at least until the Norsemen came from the east. In the centre of the Pentland Firth is the island of Stroma, which literally means the island in the current. Surrounding Stroma are the most unpredictable of seas, and just off its northern tip is the dreaded Swilkie, a great whirlpool known to Norsemen as the Svelgr or the Swallower. It was said that the horrific power of the Swilkie could pull a ship and all those aboard 15 fathoms below the sea. And the local inhabitants of Stroma recorded that the roaring and crashing of the Swilkie could be heard all over the island all year round. It is now known that that whirlpool in the Pentland Firth is caused by the meeting of multiple conflicting currents and tides. But this was not always the belief. The ancient people of the Isles told a very different story of how the Svelgr was born, and of course, why the sea is salt. A long time ago, there lived a great and powerful king in Denmark, who went by the name of King Frodi. Now in the time of Frodi, there was a great peace, which lay over all the land. The people were safe and food was plenty. But this peace did not come from King Frodi's rule. It in fact came from a giant quernstone, or millstone, that was found during Frodi's reign. The enormous stone was taken by the king and kept in his castle. It soon became widely known that this was the stone Grotti of legend. It was said that the magic mill could produce whatever the owner commanded of it. So Frodi quickly sent for his most powerful warriors to turn the stone and produce gold and riches. But no matter how strong the warrior, or how many men pushed the quern, it could not be moved. Time passed, and eventually Frodi went to visit his ally, the King of Sweden, Fjolnir. And while he was there, he met the servants of Fjolnir, two large, powerful women named Fenja and Menja. Now these women were indentured slaves to the Swedish king, but Frodi believed them to be of giant blood, and if anyone could turn Grotti, it would be them. So the Danish king asked his friend to part with the bondswoman for a hefty price, and so he did. Once Frodi returned to his castle with the daughters of the Jotun, he quickly took them to Grotti, where they were chained and bade to grind gold. True enough, once the colossal Grotti began to turn, gold flowed from the millstone, covering the floor. The king ordered the women to grind non-stop, day and night, and so they did, until Frodi's treasuries and cellars could fit no more gold. The king had gathered the greatest wealth that had ever been seen. It was only then he halted the slave women. He now ordered them to grind out peace and plenty, and so they did. The land became fertile, and no crime could take place under Frodi's peace. It was said that you could lay a purse of gold in the street and return for it a week later and find it just where you had left it. It was a wonderful time to be alive for all in the kingdom of Frodi. Well, except for two, Fenja and Menja, who were still bound to the stone of Grotti, trudging through their infinite task of turning the mill. In time, the bondswoman began to think of life before their enslavement at the hands of Fjolnir, and their Sisyphean task at the hands of Frodi. They were once proud warriors. They had levelled mountains, broken shields, shattered swords, and overthrown many a king. But now look where they had ended up. They had become the servants of those less powerful and noble than themselves. They were forced to relentlessly work in the dirt and heat. Their lives were now the dull monotony of turning the millstone forevermore. The pair called for Frodi and begged the king to grant them peace, but Frodi would not hear of it. He told the bondswoman they could have one short break, yet it would only last the length of a song before they had to return to work. This was not the reply that Fenya and Menya had wanted, so they concocted a wicked scheme to get revenge upon the king. They would sing a song of their own composition, one which became known as the Grotnisonga. As they sung, the pair continued to grind the mill, but this time they did it not for the king, but for themselves. The song was filled with hate and anger, war and famine, disease and misery, and it was all these things which now flowed from Grotti. Soon the peace of Frodi was broken, and pestilence lay over the once bountiful land. Then on one night, the heart of the song was given life. The tyrannical Sea King Misinger was born, and he arrived at Frodi's castle with a mighty host, and a terrible battle then began. By its end, nearly all of the king's men were dead or enslaved, and Frodi himself had fallen in battle. The Sea King's men would ransack the castle and empty it of gold. It was then they found Grotti and the bondswoman, but unfortunately for Fenya and Menya, Misinger cared little for their plight. He ordered that Grotti and the women be brought aboard his flagship. He told the women that he knew full well what the quern was, and that he would use it to become the wealthiest king that ever lived. But Misinger already owned many boats filled with the plundered gold, and so he moved to the next most expensive and, above all, the most tradable resource he could think of: salt. He bade the women to grind him salt, and so they did. For many days and nights the pair let salt flow from Grotti. Finally, they asked the Sea King if he was satisfied with the great mountains of salt that now resided in the cargo of his ship. But Misinger said no. He told the pair that they would have to grind out salt forevermore to grant him the resources that he required. So again, Fenya and Menya turned the great quernstone, and would grind out so much salt that the flagship flowed with the crystals, and soon it was entirely filled, so much so that the ship sank into the water. And where it sank was just north of the island of Stroma in the Pentland Firth. And as Frodi noticed before, the women certainly were of giant blood, and due to this they were immortal. The sea would not claim their lives like it did Misinger and his crew. Instead, they would continue to grind the great stone of Grotti, and the water above would be pulled into the millstone, creating a great whirlpool we now know as the Svelgr. To this very day, Fenya and Menya lay under the sea, grinding out salt with the great millstone Grotti. And that is not only why there's a whirlpool north of Stroma, but also why the sea is salty. Thank you for listening, and a special thank you to my patrons who help me keep these tales alive. This is a very old story indeed. It was first recorded by Bragi the Skald in 850 AD, and has existed throughout Scotland and most of Northern Europe as a tale of legend ever since. Now, the version I have just told is, of course, the Scottish tale, or to be more specific, the Orcadian version. But of course, this was not where the tale was born. It was told many years before in the Scandinavian countries, each of which have their own specific telling of the tale, with many differences to the Orcadian one that I know. In many it is suggested that Fenja and Menja may have created the grotty stone before they were enslaved by the Swedish king. In others, Grotty is gifted to King Frodi by a Jotun with a name I have no idea how to pronounce. On the subject of other versions of this tale, a particularly strange one is told in Norway, which seems to be a largely Christianized version of the original. In this tale, there are two brothers, one poor and one rich. It is Christmas Eve, and the poor brother asks the wealthy one for aid, so that he can afford meat and bread to celebrate Christ. The wealthy brother says he will give the poor brother pork if he does exactly what is asked of him. The poor brother agrees, and the other throws the pork at him and tells his brother to go straight to hell. Now within this tale there are also multiple versions. Occasionally it is lamb or beef the brother is gifting, and the hell that the poorer brother is sent to differs from the Christian one with 2 L's to the Norse hell with 1 L. Either way, the poor brother does just what he was asked, and walks out into the cold. There he meets a man who tells him the directions to hell, and of how all the demons and spirits will want to buy his pork, as they have no mortal food of that ilk. Yet this strange man warns the boy only to trade the pork for a small hand quern, as with it he can grind out whatever he wants. So the poor brother eventually finds his way to hell, and is pestered by the many demons, goblins, and spirits to sell his pork, but he refuses all of these trades until he meets the devil himself, and asks him for the hand quern. A deal is quickly struck, and now in possession of the magical quern stone, the brother returns home and uses it to mill out meat and drink to last the 12 days of celebration. Eventually, his wealthy brother finds the mill and discovers its power, and being a spiteful and wicked man, he steals the quern and uses it for his own gain. Then there came a day when the now unfathomably wealthy brother met a skipper of a local boat who had heard tales of the devil's quern and wanted to see it in action. The sailor would then offer the brother a vast amount of wealth and power for the quern, to which the greedy man readily accepted. Once the skipper was back at sea, he commanded the quern to grind out salt, which filled his ship, sank it, and now sits on the seabed, grinding salt forevermore. This corruption of the tale seems to be a way of trying to replace the original, while introducing Christian values into the story. What I found particularly interesting about not only this tale from Norway, but the original Norse tale as well, was how the concept of a mill grinding salt can be found in many other narratives for why the sea is salty. Another tale told in Denmark tells of a boy Hans who finds a magical coffee grinder, which eventually falls into the sea. In Germany, a young man is gifted a magical mill by his grandmother, and after many trials and tribulations, the mill, in this case, cut to pieces and shattered, but still continues to produce salt, is thrown into the sea to save the ship. In Russia, 2 boys steal a magic mill from a goblin, and eventually it ends up in the sea, eternally grinding salt. There is even a tale from Japan, known as the hand mill that grounds salt, which is very similar to these other stories. It is my belief that the Norse version of this tale, linked to King Frodi, may be the oldest telling of such a tale, and the others are latter versions updated or changed by storytellers and time. There is actually some evidence for this in relation to the Japanese tale, with it being mentioned from a couple of sources that the tale was imported from European sailors. Even the idea of creating something from nothing has existed throughout man's history, from the magic of the ancients, to Grotty, to the philosopher's stone, or the alchemical redstone, all the way up to more recent entries, like the Brothers Grimm and the magic porridge pot. It is a concept that we still use in modern narratives, whether in novels or films, and it seems so strange that this idea of creating something from nothing has captivated the thoughts of mankind for so many years. I hope you all enjoyed this tale. It is certainly a little different from our normal stories, taking place mostly in Denmark, but as all good stories do, it eventually ends back in bonnie Scotland. Slàinte mhath.